we have a lot of well-wishers and acquaintances, and few flesh and blood friends. One of the most challenging summers of my life was in 2005. It was my second internship that I had done as a youth pastor, and I had started a youth group in this small little Brethren church in German, Pennsylvania. It was about half an hour away from where I went to Bible college, and two other students and I from the Bible college got connected to this church and said, yeah, let's start up a youth group. The church body was about 20 people, and the average age was over 60. So there wasn't a lot of young people. So we got plugged into the community in the neighborhood, and before we knew it, we had almost 20 students coming to youth group. So we had doubled the size of the church with young people. It was exciting. So we'd spent the school year ministering with the students, and I was excited to come back to New Hampshire, and I had a good job that I could come back and work doing hardwood flooring, making good money for a young man at the time. So I was thinking, I'm going to go back home. Well, the three students, we got together and we talked, man, this ministry is really taking off. We're seeing kids come to know the Lord. We're seeing them grow in their walk. I mean, we don't want to lose this momentum that God is doing in their lives. So we should start praying about which one of us is going to stay this summer and maybe do an internship at this church and continue to run the youth group. And so I was like, oh, great, yeah, God will have one of these guys do it. Well, neither of them wanted to, and so we started praying about it. And before I knew it, I was telling God, Lord, I don't have a place to live. At the time, I didn't have a car, and I didn't have a job to support me while I was out there doing this internship. I said, man, I'm not going to put any effort into getting any of those things. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Before I knew it, I had been offered a place to live for free for the summer from someone in the church. Someone in the church had sold me a car for $50. It's a 1987 Nissan Stanza, and I had gutted the catalytic converter, so the thing sounded like just a Harley Davidson. It was awful. It was like, brrr! I mean, you could hear me coming from miles away. And so I had also been offered a job that was enough to support myself to stay there. Man, and I did not want to go. So I remember calling my dad and saying, Dad, I got all this stuff lined up, but I really don't want to do it. And he said, well, it sounds a lot like Jonah. He's like, I don't think you're going to get swallowed by a fish in the middle of eastern Pennsylvania, but you might want to be afraid of lightning. And so I said, okay, all right, Lord, I'll stay. So sure enough, I stayed. And it was a tough ministry. It was a tough summer. The pastor and I shared very little in common. He was very elderly. He was in his late 70s, and philosophically, we didn't see eye to eye. There was no one else my age in the church. There was no one else sharing the ministry with me. And it was challenging. I felt very, very lonely. I was pouring all of my time into work and into these students and looking for a mentor, and I had none. And I was desperate for friendship. And I almost got burnt out. I was almost ready to quit. I remember there's nights just being in tears saying, God, what am I doing here? I feel so alone. If this is what ministry is, I want to have nothing to do with it. We are desperate for friendships, for relationship. We're not meant to go through life by ourselves. Life is messy. Ministry is messy. We need friendships. We need relationships. My goal this morning is not to help you necessarily find friends, at least not directly, but to help you be a better friend, or at least think about being a better friend. Because people who are the best friends typically have best friends. So this morning we're going to take a look at 4 truths that shape our friendships, and I hope they'll shape our friendships here at Calvary Bible Church. So if you're already there, or if you haven't turned there, let's take a look at John chapter 15. And we're going to read this passage together, starting in verse 12 through verse 17. Really focus in on a couple of the verses that Cameron already read to us. And we'll see that the gospel is the ultimate example of friendship. The gospel is the ultimate example of friendship. And let's take a moment and read this passage together. John 15, starting at verse 12. Jesus is speaking here to his disciples. And this is not uh, too long before he would go and die on the cross, sacrificing his life for these men, for us. So he's speaking to men that he's shared life with, he's walked with, he's done miracles in front of, he's taught them, he's developed relationships with them, friendships with them, he cares about them. And he says this in verse 12, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lays down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from the Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another." He wanted them to experience friendship, and he demonstrated to them the most intricate part of friendship is love. He demonstrated that through sacrifice. I love in 1 John 4:19, he writes, "We love because he first loved us." Jesus took the initiative to start friendship with us. We were enemies of God. We were far from him. Our hearts were far from him. And yet he initiated a relationship with us so that he could reconcile us to God, but that we may experience friendship. We may experience a loving friend. Jesus sacrificed for his friends. No greater love than the one who would lay down his life for his friend. How many of you, if you ask yourself honestly, said, "Yeah, I know some friends that would give their life for me"? There's not many people. I would be hard-pressed to say, "Yeah, I'm going to give up my life for some of you so that my wife and children can be a widow and fatherless and have to go through life." I'm not sure I would jump up at that opportunity, honestly, if I asked myself. It would be hard. I care about you, I love you, but that's a deep love. But I have gone through life with some friends who I would, without even hesitating, just a few men who I would absolutely give my life for. We've gone through a lot. Do you have someone like that in your life? Well, Jesus is that person. He is a friend to us in an amazing way. He is a friend who forgives, a friend who is faithful, and a friend who is loving. It's interesting in the text that he says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you." That doesn't really sound like a friendship between people. If I said, "Yeah, I'll be your friend as long as you do everything that I tell you to," you're going to be like, "Okay, Chris." That's no friendship. Well, this is God speaking, okay? So he gets to set the tone. So don't think that one another, that's a good way to start friendship with somebody. "Hey, I'll be your friend if you just do what I tell you." No, this is Jesus speaking. He's saying this for the benefit because he needs us to follow him, to be reconciled. And I love how he says, "No longer do I call you servants, for servants does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you." He has shared with them purpose of life. He's given them a mission. And so we heard earlier the description of friendship is a mutual affection, mutual interest, mutual purpose. Well, Jesus has given these men that. He has said, "Now you're no longer my servants, you're my friends. You're going to go out and share in my ministry. You're going to go out and love other people as I have loved." That's what he's calling them to. To love others, to love friends. You're going to go do the same thing. I'm going to reproduce you, and you're going to reproduce other followers. They are sharing in that same purpose. Jesus is demonstrating that friendship shares an eternal purpose, in eternal goals. And I hope that we share them here. We're here this morning, right? Because we boast in nothing other than the cross. We all have that common thread. We're here because of Jesus and what he's done. We recognize that we need him. So right off the bat, in this room, we've got almost 500 people that could sit and say, we have something in common. I need Jesus. You do too. The gospel is the ultimate example of friendship. So let that be the model for which we are friends to others. Are we friends to others in the way that Jesus is a friend to us? The second truth I think that should shape our friendships is that friendship should be found in some obvious but often ignored places. When looking for friends, sometimes we forget that there's some obvious things right in front of us. One of the things that I love about Scriptures, it deals a lot with wisdom, and we'll take a look at a few Proverbs this morning dealing with the theme of friendship. But if you dig through Proverbs, you'll see a lot of wisdom in there telling you to pursue wisdom and pursue others who have it. So one of the things that I think we often miss or we often don't do is have intergenerational friendships. Intergenerational friendships. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companions of fools will suffer harm." So let's just put that into real life terms. People who have lived longer have experienced more. People who have walked with the Lord have studied more, have learned to serve God more. So I should want to learn from them. I should want to be friends so that I can learn what they're doing, share mutual interests, and that they can speak truth into my life. If I'm an older person, I would want to say, man, I want to know how can I speak truth and have an opportunity to interact with the younger generations. Spending time with people from other generations will expose different preferences and beliefs. This could lead us further into generational narcissism. What I mean by that is comments like, boy, do these whippersnappers have a lot to learn. Or, man, these geezers don't know anything anymore. They're so out of touch. You know, that could be the thoughts that enter our mind. But it also can and should lead us back to God's Word, because conflict might expose blind spots in our generations. I've benefited from my older friends' experience in marriage and parenting. Talking to mentors and elders in my church or pastors who range from the 40s to 60s has helped me to see what growing into responsibility and faithfulness to the church looks like. I have become wiser, and the burden of learning is definitely on us younger people. But each generation can gain wisdom from the perspective of others. This picture I want to show you is a picture of my groomsmen at the day that I got married. And one of the things that I look back and, you think of groomsmen who stand before you and witness your marriage. These are your friends, right? These are your closest guys who you want to be held accountable to. Hey, I'm marrying this woman. Make sure that I'm faithful to her, that I treat her well. And Laura, and I think I've shared this with you before, but Laura knows that if I'm acting like a knucklehead, at any moment in time, she can call any one of these guys and say, hey, Chris is being a jerk and won't listen to me, he won't repent, and I'll get a phone call from them. Or when we were living closer to some of them, they'd show up and knock on my door, hey buddy, and say, what are you doing? You need to wisen up. And so then if I ended up going back to Laura and saying, why did you call them? Leave them out of this. I'd get another phone call saying, hey, we're just doing what we made a covenant to do to help you in your marriage, so knock it off. And one of them would even put me in a knucklehead if I needed to. But one of the things that I loved about this group of guys is that I'm the youngest. And you laugh, but I loved that about my friends, the men who stood with me. You'll see my dad up there, and the guy right above him, his name is Dave Draper. And Dave Draper he's the oldest guy in the group, and he was in his 50s, and he became one of my really, really good friends. We served together in a church in Scranton, and he wasn't in full-time ministry. He was an accountant by trade, and he had raised two boys of his own, and we served together. I led a prayer meeting at his house, and we just became really good friends, and I allowed him to speak truth into my life, and we shared common interests. We started becoming friends together because we would get together on Wednesday nights after prayer meeting and play basketball. And let me tell you, he is probably the best 50-year-old basketball player I've ever interacted with. He's a huge Boston Celtics fan, so we were like kindred spirits in Pennsylvania, around all these weird Philly fans to be like rooting, for the Celtics. And he mimicked all his stuff after Kevin McHale, so he would shoot the basketball like way up there for any of you Celtics fans. But I remember Dave, I was out of college, and I was living in Scranton and serving and working at this church in Scranton, and I had just gotten out of a pretty serious long-term relationship about less than a year ago, and I met Laura, and I was like, I want to ask this girl out. And I was like, but I'm not sure I'm ready to go down this path, and I want to make sure I do things properly, and I want to make sure that she's a woman that is worthy to be pursued. So Dave said, hey, well, let's make observations about Laura and pray about it for a month before you ask her out. And I love that about him, because we just spent a month saying, okay, what's her character like? How does she respond to different things? And then finally we sat down. He's like, yeah, dude, you need to ask this girl out. And I was like, okay. And so sure enough, I did. And then I remember when she met my parents, and my dad is a good friend of mine, him and my mom kind of said, don't mess this up, because if you do, we're keeping her and getting rid of you. And they were like dead serious. Dead serious. So, and then if you who know my wife, she is a gem. She is just the jewel of my heart. So, but these guys are great. Dan, Dan's kind of sitting there in the front, and Dan is the other Dan's trying to lift up that big anchor thing. They were both older than me. They were both pastors. They did a lot of ministry with me, and I was just thankful because these older guys were able to speak truth into my life. They knew things that I didn't because they had experienced them beforehand. They both had kids, so then when Laura and I got pregnant with Miles, man, they were able to speak a lot of truth into our lives. We had crises in our lives that they came in, intervened, and helped us and spoke truth. And then oftentimes, we had fun. We just shared life together. We did things that had mutual interests. Pretty much every guy there likes to play basketball or is musical somehow. And so the night before I got married, we all got together and played basketball. And then some of us played music. And so it was awesome. We shared mutual interests. But I had guys who were older than me who spoke truth into my life. So the reason that I thought about this truth being important to shaping our friendships was our men's breakfast, for those of you guys, tends to be an older crowd. And you guys are like, hey, I want to disciple guys. I want to invest into these guys' lives. Well, if I can encourage you gentlemen and you older ladies, start off by just finding someone who's younger than you who you can just be a friend to. Be a friend. Just spend time with them. Some of you guys like to fish. Take a younger guy out. Teach him how to fish. If you know how to go hunting or you like sports, whatever. I don't know what ladies like to do. I think you crochet and stuff like that, right? That's probably really like generic and, yeah, I'm sorry. You do more things than that. But what I mean by this is just spend time with them. Get to know them. Listen. Find out about them. Because that friendship will then allow you to invest eternally. It will allow you to speak truth into their lives. And young people, seek out older people. They're not just disenchanted because they don't have Facebook or they don't text or, they don't keep up with all the same things that you do. They don't like the same music. Don't let that be a divider because they have so much to offer. And the older generation, the young people have a lot to offer too. Aim for those friendships. Aim to learn from one another. Intergenerational friendships can lead us to grow in godliness. They do this first by forcing us to love more maturely. The more I have in common with someone, the easier it is to love him. Loving someone different from me requires me to love more deliberately. I'm going to have to ask more questions and listen better. To hear things I don't understand and maybe things I don't agree with, I might have to sacrifice things on my schedule or even my style. But developing that intergenerational friendship will make me into a more mature and loving person. Intergenerational friendships will also help me develop humility. No matter my age, I must set aside my generation's narcissistic tendency that we have figured it out and everyone else has to listen up. My generation is saturated with their views and expressing them on politics, entertainment, or even church music. Man, hot topics, right? They may not be the only people with godly, rational, and socially aware viewpoints. I may find issues that on biblical reflection, godly people can freely disagree on, or my viewpoints may be flat out wrong. Making friends with people of other generations teaches me godly humility. We need these friendships. We need friendships with intergenerational people. The second friendship that is often overlooked, that's right in front of us, is marriage. Marriage friendships. We've been blessed, Laura and I, with 8 other couples have been attending a marriage study that Pastor Talley is leading, and through the book, Real Marriage. And one of the chapters in the book, which I think is maybe the heartbeat of the book, and for those of you who are in the study, you'll agree with me, that friendship with our spouse is a big deal, and we often overlook it. I'm not going to read the whole passage because it was really awkward reading it in the group before, but Song of Songs 5:16, at the end of it, it's from a woman reading about a man, and it was kind of awkward because I was reading about a man and talking about his thighs and how, wonderful they are. So I'm not going to read that to you. But at the end of it, this woman, she's talking about her spouse, and she says, "This is my beloved, and this is my friend," in Song of Songs 5:16. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. Mark Driscoll in his books write that marriage is about friendship. All the talk about spending time and doing life together, making memories, being a good listener, growing old and taking care of each other, being honest, having the long view of things, repenting and forgiving can be summed up in one word: friendship. Friendship. This awakened my marriage with Laura. We had gotten really focused on children and ministry, and we would get together and we would spend time together and make sure that we were trying to meet each other's needs, but we had kind of forgot just to be friends, to listen and be excited about what was going on in the other's life that maybe we weren't part of. Spending time trying to laugh with each other, to laugh at each other. I can do some pretty stupid things, and so she's learning to laugh at me more, and I'm learning to laugh back with her. She's made, to her credit, just this loving, sacrificial investment to like things that are nerdy. So, I grew up liking, Star Trek and sci-fi and comic books. And so she, I remember when the new Avengers movie came out, and I was like, "Oh, hey, honey, let's try to spend the next month, watching the movies that lit up before it." She hadn't seen them. She's like, "Okay." And so she did. She would ask me questions, and I could tell that she was actually trying to listen and connect with me because she knew that I liked it and cared about it. And so I've been trying to do the same thing. Some of you ladies do this whole swag bucks thing. There's a help group for husbands who have spouses who do that. Let me know. We can get together. But swag bucks, so she just earns all these points and search points, and it's like Google, but you earn points for searching for things. And so I've been trying to help her earn swag bucks so that she can get gift cards and stuff. So she feels like that's appreciative. So whatever it is in your marriage, though, are you being friends? Are you making time just to be friends? Because it's the person who you live with. It's the person who you spend time with. And oftentimes we can get so consumed with all this other stuff that we forget about that important investment of just being friends with our spouse. Husbands and wives who want their marriages to be enduring and endearing must be friends. Driscoll also says this. He says it is easier for a woman to think of doing life with a friend than a dictator or unemotional ruler. The husband is still the head, but a loving her as Christ loves the church head, a considerate friend. Husbands, if you want your wives to follow your leadership, be her friend. be her friend. Listen to her. Spend time with her. Have fun. Do you know that it's okay to have fun? Sometimes, I get caught up in, ministry is always serious. And then God gave us Pastor Woogie. And he is just awesome because Woogie's just fun all the time. And he's really generous to me. He'll come in and listen to my rants about nerdy stuff. And he doesn't care, but he'll listen. But he's fun. He's just fun to be around. And I'm thankful for that because sometimes, you think ministry, it can be messy. People's lives are messy. But as believers, we're all together with the joy of the Lord. And we can have fun together. We can have friends that are fun and do fun things together. It should be something that we do often. We're told that the world should know of Jesus because of our love for one another. It's the joy of the Lord here. Do people come in here and say, yeah, man, there's something about this church that's really kind of cool. It's fun. They like each other and they're friends. It's that something we do. The next place, and you'll probably get tired of us talking about this, but I'm not going to stop because it's important. The next obvious place that friendship can be found is in small groups. This is a big church, almost 500 people here. You're not going to be friends with everybody. You're not going to know everybody well. But you can know a few people well. And you can share life together with a few people really, really well. Small groups are important. My prayer is that in your small groups that you learn to have fun together, that you learn to be friends with one another. Because in that seed being planted of friendship, when trials come, you'll be ready to serve and love one another well. You're listening to the same teaching, and then you're getting together with a bunch of people who are like-minded and want to grow in the Lord, who are learning the same things you are from the pulpit, from our church, live in the same community. It makes sense to have those people be able to be friends. Now, you may not connect with everybody, and that's okay. But you can aim to be a good friend to those people. And if you're being a good friend, man, we'll meet each other's needs so much better if we build these friendships. All right. The next truth that I would like us to think about and how it shapes our friendships is that we should be thoughtful and intentional with and in our friendships. The Bible has so much to say on friendship that we often ignore. And so we're gonna plow through a few different passages here, and so just bear with me. But a lot of them are in Proverbs, and they're just truths about friendship that we need to think about. The first one isn't specifically about friendship, but again, using the gospel as our example, using the love of God and Jesus as our example. In Deuteronomy 7:7, we see that God specifically talks about how he chose Israel, not because they were large or because they were anything special, because in terms of nations, they were kind of like the poor and pathetic. But God chose them, not looking for who they were in their greatness or what they could give him, but he simply said, I'm going to choose you. And so I ask you this question: are we friends with people for our own game or for common love and eternal goals? Are we friends with people because, man, I can get stuff and they'll benefit me? Or are we friends with somebody because God simply said, you need to choose to love this person? Proverbs 14:20 is similar. It says, the poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich man has many friends. We all have that person in our neighborhood, right, who doesn't quite take care of the lawn the way that we all do. They're like the scourge of the neighborhood or whatever. And you think, man, I wish they would take care of their lawn and make my neighborhood look nice. Guess what? Those people need friends too. Maybe they have a lot going on in there. There's some laughing. I'm sorry if some of you are those people. It's okay. I had Andrew Hilker look at my lawn one time, and it's patchy, and all of a sudden I'm trying to seed it. It's a mess. So I'm that guy. But those people need friends, the poor and the desolate. And we need to be intentional about that. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. This is an important truth. We want everyone to like us. We've got, TV shows that are all about that. You think of like Cheers, walk in, I want to go somewhere where everybody knows my name, That's important for us to be liked. I've said this before, but we are addicts of affirmation. That's what Facebook is all about. Like. I go on, did somebody like my photo? Did somebody like my post? It can be really dangerous. But there are few people who stick closer than a brother. It's important. Invest in those close relationships. It's okay if you don't have lots and lots of friends, if you have a few or even one who is your friend, who you can be a friend to and invest in and share life with intimately. Proverbs 22:24-25 says, "Make no friendships with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." We need to be purposeful and intentional about who our friends are because they will influence us. And sometimes there can be ramifications of spending time with somebody who can get you in trouble. This example is somebody who has anger. It can rub off on you. There's this thing called peer pressure, right? We don't realize that it's not just in schools. It happens with adults too. The way that we dress, the music we listen to, all of that is shaped by our peers. How we talk, all of that can be influenced by our friends. So who our friends are is important. Who our friends are will shape how we think and developing our worldview. So it's important to be purposeful about who are our friends. I love this verse in Proverbs 27:6. "Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy." A true friend isn't going to hold punches back in terms of speaking truth to you. They're not a yes man, just telling you always what you want to look for. A true friend is going to tell you, had wounded me with truth. And I'm so grateful for it. Because otherwise, I would have remained in that sin. I would have remained walking down that pathway. We need to have friends that we're willing to let wound us in a positive way for our own benefit and still be able to reconcile that friendship and recognize they're doing this in love. So for you, how can you be a good friend to your friends? Speak truth to somebody and then just don't walk away. Speak truth to them and continue to love them. Continue to serve them. Look for opportunities to encourage them. If you speak truth to them and say, you're doing something wrong or you're messing up, make sure that you just don't say it and walk away and separate yourself. Invest eternally. It's going to be hard. It's going to be messy. It's going to be awkward because we don't like calling one another out. We like to, happy face, hi, everything's good. How's your week? Great, I'm good. When really there is stuff in our lives that is a mess. Let your friends know, and then they can help you. They can speak truth to you. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. So recognize those who are speaking truth to you. They do it because they love you. And be somebody that speaks truth to one another. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 says this, "Two are better than one, because they have good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up." Paul talks about bearing one another's burdens, right? We understand this theme. It is important for us to go through life because sometimes we need someone to pick us up. Sometimes the darkness and despair can seem so overwhelming in our lives that we need a friend to come up and say, "It's okay, I'm with you, and we're going to get through it." We need one another. We need friends. Because we can go down these dark roads and then just a slippery slope. And before you know it, we don't care about anything or anyone, even ourselves. We need friends. We need friends. Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for adversity. I think I would like to translate this a little differently, studying it more. I would say a brother is born out of adversity or from adversity, meaning this, that there are friends who love us at all times. And when we fall or when we sin or adversity comes in our lives, they become closer to a brother to us through these trials. When our lives get tough and messy, they don't walk away, they get closer. They're willing to come and share in the toil, in the mourning, in the sadness with you, knowing that you're not alone. Are you that type of friend? You see adversity in your friend's life and you say, rather than just giving them space, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to see, what can I do? How can I help you? How can I walk alongside you? How can I share in your burden? I'm so thankful. We have some of these guys we get together, and our kids call them Uncle because they're like family. So they're like, hey, Uncle Dan, because they know that my friend Dan has gone through adversity, and I call him Uncle. He's your uncle. He's like family to us. And he chose to be my family by how he served and loved me in dark times. How he spoke truth to me, how he picked me up out of the depths of despair that I had just dwelt in. That's the kind of friend that I want to be. That's the kind of friend that you should want to be too. We need to be thoughtful and intentional with and in our friendships. The fourth truth that should shape our friendships is going to take a little explaining, but we're going to unpack it together. Jesus is a friend to sinners, and we should be too. First off, friendships provide the relationships that bring about 90% of the people into the family of God. Consistently, statistics tell us that about 90% of the people who become Christians do so through a friend or a family member. We spend a ton of time on evangelistic outreach opportunities. They're not wrong. But the best way to share the gospel with somebody is to be their friend. Be a friend to them. Show them. When they see it, then listen. They see that you genuinely care about them, they'll listen. Jesus modeled this for us. I also like to point out that Jesus didn't say, love the sinner. Instead, he said, love your neighbor, which meant you're in the same boat. Don't think of yourself as better than them. What did we say before? We're here because we boast in nothing other than the cross. So the only reason that you're not lost like an unbeliever is by the grace of God. So don't forget that. This precise phrase, friend of sinners, is mentioned twice in the Gospels, in Matthew 11:19 and Luke 7:34. And it was coined by the naysayers of the day, the religious leaders who criticized Jesus as a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. They called him this because part of it was true. He was a friend of sinners. Jesus himself said that he didn't come for the spiritually healthy, but for the sick. In Luke 5:31, he says, I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So he came here for us sinners. You're in that mix. So no, don't be a friend of sinners, per se. That's a phrase coined by the self-righteous to elevate themselves above others. Don't be a friend of sinners. Just be a friend. Be like Jesus, who looked at people that had been defined by their sins and instead saw names and faces and stories and hope. Two of my favorite authors were actually friends. And some of you may know them. C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Both of them have written some pretty impressive stories. Most of you will know Tolkien is on the right and he wrote The Lord of the Rings and the book The Hobbit, which have been made into big movies and really, really popular. He kind of really pioneered the fantasy genre. And C.S. Lewis has written the Chronicles of Narnia and a bunch of children's books about some pretty amazing stories. And Lewis was actually an atheist. So these two men were both literature professors at Oxford University in England. And you'll see the two of them there are smoking their pipes. So in England, things weren't as taboo back then in that culture. So these professors would all get together after their classes and talk about life and philosophy and God at the pub. And so they'd go to the pub, they sit down with their pipes, and they'd just talk. And so Tolkien, who was a believer, became friends with Lewis. And they would spend time together talking about writing, and they were in this discussion club that was kind of like unofficial called the Inklings. And you can go and you can do a bunch of research on their friendship. It's pretty cool. But basically, Tolkien kept talking to Lewis about that God is real. And so Lewis, being a staunch atheist, was like, nope, not going to happen, don't believe it. And so they started talking in the late 1920s. And so for years, they had this friendship. And they would go on long walks, and they had this pathway called Addison's Walk, and they would walk through talking about life, talking about God. And so Lewis finally came to a point where he said, okay, I'm no longer an atheist, but I'm a theist. I believe that there's some kind of all-powerful being. I'm not sure that it's the God of the Bible. And I don't think that it's Jesus. And so Tolkien continued to talk to him for years and years and years. And then 2 years later, after he said, I'm a theist, he finally came to the point where he said, you know what? I'm a Christian. I believe that God is the God of the Bible, and that Jesus is indeed the Son of God and my Savior. And he wrote this to a friend. He said, this is C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis has written some pretty amazing Christian literature. He's written some great, well-renowned church philosophy, self-help books or whatnot, but he has written some great books as a believer, and I would recommend you reading him. But he says this, he says, when I began teaching for the English faculty, I made 2 other friends, both Christians. Those queer people seem to pop up on every side. Who were later to give me much help in getting over the last steps. They were H.V.D. Dyson and J.R.R. Tolkien. Friendship with the latter marked the breakdown of 2 old prejudices. Lewis said to Tolkien that tales or myths are lies and therefore worthless, even though breathed through silver. No, said Tolkien, they are not lies. Tolkien went on to explain to Lewis that in Jesus Christ, the ancient stories or myths of a dying and rising God entered history and became fact. 12 days later, Lewis wrote to another friend, Arthur Greeves, I've just passed on from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ, in Christianity. I will try to explain this another time. My long night talk with Dyson and Tolkien had a good deal to do with it. And then Tolkien writes later on in his life, any pleasure on earth is great as a circle of Christian friends by a good fire. This man was brought to salvation as an unbeliever because of his Christian friend, who was not afraid to engage in life with him, was not afraid to share what he believed, to speak truth, to speak saving truth to his friend. And then God took C.S. Lewis, redeemed him and saved him, and then launched him to, in turn, minister to people well beyond his lifetime through his writings. You have no clue how being a friend to an unbeliever can change their life and change this world. So we need to be okay with marginal. In the example of Jesus, we need to be all right with the marginal all the way around. Be okay with associating with the marginal, the poor, the destitute, those often overlooked in society. Go there. Be with this people. Serve them. Learn from them. And be okay with being thought marginal yourself. In Luke 7:22, we see him talking about that. But I want to say, of course, I'm not encouraging people with drinking problems to go hang out in bars. I don't expect new Christians to necessarily keep all their same friends who lead them into the same temptations. I'm not saying that if you really want to be relevant, you have to watch sleazy movies so you can talk about them with sinners in our lives. We need to use wisdom. We are to be a friend to sinners and a no friend to sin. It's important that we understand that difference. That we're called to love sinners, but then in James it says we should not be friends of the world. There's a difference. We're friends to people, right? Jesus recognized people as being a name, a person. They have stories. He gave them hope. So our aim as believers is to love, not to be liked. That's going to be a challenge for us, right? We like to be liked. We like people to like us. We want them to think well of us. We must nail this down. The aim of our charge is love, not popularity. If you look in 1 Timothy, briefly, chapter 1. Here we go. In 1:5, he writes, "The aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and good conscience and sincere faith, genuinely loving people, just as Jesus did." Jesus constantly infuriated the popular ideas of his day. They knew his teaching contradicted their own, and rather than like him and wrap their arms around him in happy tolerance, they tried to shut him up. And he warned his disciples, if they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? In Matthew 10:25. People are going to discredit us, but that shouldn't stop us from loving. Jesus was a friend of sinners, not because he winked at sin, ignored sin, or enjoyed lighthearted revelry with those engaged in immorality. Jesus was a friend of sinners in that he came to save sinners, and was very pleased to welcome sinners who were open to the gospel, sorry for their sins, and on their way to putting their faith in him. Are we friends to the lost? Are we purposeful about that? Are we purposeful about being a friend to them? About demonstrating to them the love that God has for them? We need to tell them, but we need to show them. And we can do that through friendship. So this morning, as we close, let's think of what a gift friendship is. What a gift to have the perfect example of friendship in Jesus. So ask yourselves the questions. What type of friend are you? What type of friendships do you have? You may be somebody who needs friends. Find some. Make an effort to go talk to people. It's scary, but make some effort. Some of you may be completely okay with being on your own. Sometimes there's days that I wouldn't mind, sometimes I watch the show Mountain Men, these guys that live up in the mountains away from everybody, and sometimes that's really appealing because that life is a little less messy, okay? But no, we need to, those of us who may have that desire just to be off on our own, maybe you need to be a friend to somebody. You're called to. You're called to love others and befriend others. Think about being intentional with your friendships. I pray that we live intentionally to be good friends here at Calvary Bible Church. I pray that many of you develop strong, deep friendships with one another here at Calvary Bible Church. And I pray that our community is reached by us being good friends to them. All because Jesus was a good friend to us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you again for your love. We thank you that we who were dead in our trespasses were reconciled to you. We are no longer enemies or slaves or servants, but you now call us friends. Thank you for giving us purpose, for giving us mission. I pray that we would be purposeful in our friendships. We'd be purposeful with our intergenerational friendships, and our marriage friendships, and the friendships within our church, and our friendships with unbelievers. Help us to be good friends. Help us to heed the wisdom of your word. May we be people who bathe ourselves in your word, shaping our worldview, shaping the way that we think about friendships, that we may glorify and honor you, that many may know you as King and participate in serving and living in your eternal kingdom. Lord, again, we remember your grace. Let us not forget it as we serve and love one another in friendship. We pray this in your name. Amen.